The Ashoka Chakra is a depiction of the Dharma Chakra, a wheel represented with 24 spokes in it. It is called the Ashoka Chakra because it appears on a number of edicts of King Ashoka of the 2nd century BC, hailed as one of the greatest kings of India. Most prominent among the depictions is on the lion capital of King Ashoka. The most visible use of the Ashoka Chakra today is at the center of the Indian flag, the tricolor, in which it is rendered in navy blue on a white background. The pre-independent versions of the flag had carried the symbol of charkha, the spinning wheel of Mahatma Gandhi. Chakra. The wheel for Gandhi was a mascot to bring about his revolution and his revolutionary message of truth, non-violence, and universal cooperation. Just as all the planets are spinning around the sun, each planet is spinning around itself, and we are all the spinning tools in this whole spinning of the universe. The charkha, or the spinning wheel, charkha actually means revolving or revolution, was the physical embodiment, the symbol of Gandhiji's constructive program. It represents Swadeshi, self-sufficiency, and at the same time interdependence, because the wheel is at the center of a network of cotton growers, carders, weavers, distributors, and users. The spinning wheel charkha embodied the dignity of labor, equality, and unity, as all volunteers were to spin each day, and finally independence, as British control of India was rooted in control of indigenous industries such as textiles. It all began in Champaran. Champaran, near the foothills of Himalaya, in North Bihar, a very remote area where the teen katia cultivation was imposed by the British, and the huge landholders, owners were harassing the poor cultivator, and indigo was making the soil incultivable for their daily needs of paddy, rice, and millet. No amount of petition or requests had fallen on any sympathetic ear. Gandhi had returned from South Africa. All his reputation had reached the whole of India, and he had set up his Kochrab ashram after having spent some time with his disciples at Tagore's Shantiniketan, and 1917 was attending the Lucknow convention. And this man comes all the way from Champaran to meet Gandhiji. He is not allowing him to move anywhere. He's just following him like a shadow. And he says, you can come and help us in Champaran. You are the legal brain. Gandhi tries to argue with him, and he says, you know, I'm a Gujarati, I don't know your language, I have not been in India for 22 years, I don't know what to do. But Rajkumar Shukla says, no, you're coming with me, and I will show you what is happening in my place. So Gandhi agrees to go to Champaran. On the way in Patna, Rajkumar Shukla takes him to Rajendra Prasad's house. Rajendra Prasad, a young, brilliant lawyer about to be given a judicial post, was not at home. Become a stenographer, a script writer for Gandhi. What is the script that he had to write? and the very many elite lawyers that Gandhiji requested to come over and be volunteers in this Champaran Satyagraha, all these very well educated lawyers from elite families, including Rajendra Prasad, were asked by Gandhi to go door to door and interview everyone in all the villages of Champaran. Their issues, what is happening to them, and what is the solution that they think they can get. Because Gandhi, being a Gujarati and having been away from India, knowing only Hindi, did not know this language, this dialect in Champaran, and most of it was written in a Kaiti language. Kaiti was the dialect there, and in Urdu. Because he did not know them, he recruits all these people to go from door to door and translate everything to Gandhi. He gives them a huge questionnaire and do the survey. These elitist, highly placed lawyers are going from hut to hut and forgetting about caste differences, eating anywhere, sitting in the houses. Complete revolution at that time. Total revolution, because no one would overlook caste differences those days. But these lawyers go from house to house. And Mahatma Gandhi says to his wife, Kasturba, he brings Kasturba there, and he says, you go talk to the women. Kasturba is aghast and she says, how can I talk to women here? I don't know their language. He says, go and ask for a glass of water in a house and they will let you in and you talk to them. She goes to a house and knocks on a door, a small hut, and from inside, "Kaun hai?" "Me, Kasturbai, Gandhi, mujhe pani chahiye." She says, "I want water." A glass of water comes out from the door, but the door is shut. Just that slit from the slit of the door. She says, "Are you not going to ask me to come in and give me water?" The voice from inside tells her, "There's only one piece of cloth in this house. There's only one sari, and that has been worn by my sister-in-law to the field today. How can I open the door for you?" Gandhi's wife, Kasturba, is overcome by emotion, and she comes and narrates this to her husband. And that moment, the spinning revolution begins in India. He says, no amount of political freedom do we need. We don't need legal freedom. We need dignified living. And this is what we must bring in. And so he starts, side by side, working on the legal issues of the indigo plantation problems. He says we must begin to talk about dignity, self-respect, and living in self-sustenance and making our own clothes. This is how the spinning revolution begins in India. Gandhiji and his associates visit many villages in Champaran. They cross-examine around 8,000 villagers and record their statements. In this way, he arrives at an exact understanding of their grievance and the causes underlying them. He comes to the conclusion that the ignorance of the villagers was the main reason why it was possible for the European planters to repress them. So he decides, with his associates like J.B. Kripalani, Rajendra Prasad, and several others, to set up voluntary organizations to improve the economic and educational conditions of the people. They open schools to teach people how to improve sanitation.
गांधी આવ્યો બિહારમાં એનો છોડવો ગયો ગુજરાત રે ગાંધી રંગ લાગ્યો ગાંધી રંગ લાગ્યો રંગ લાગ્યો ચંપારણ એ રડકો પડ્યો બરડોલીએ ઊંચ ऊंची घाट रे गांधी रंग लागियो रंग लागियो चंपारण हे तड़को पड़ियो बरडोलिए ऊंची घाट रे गांधी रंग लागियो रंग लागियो गांधी नु जादू धीरे धीरे कालिदास नु हर एक घाट रे गांधी नु जादू धीरे धीरे कालिदास नु हर एक घाट रे गांधी रंग लागियो गांधी रंग लागियो रंग लागियो
District magistrate does not welcome Gandhi. He serves him a notice and he says, you have 24 hours to leave this place or else you will be arrested. And all the people in Champaran are startled and they're aghast. How can they arrest this man? And Gandhi says, I don't need any lawyer and I will appear for myself because I am trained as a lawyer. And he goes to the court and there is a huge crowd of peasants outside the court screaming. And the judge says, you give a fine of 100 rupees and we will let you go. And then you also tell us that you will be leaving this place and you will not come back. Gandhi says, I'm sorry, I'm not agreeing for both. You may arrest me. The noise outside is growing louder and louder. People are screaming and the people in the court are afraid. One can see anxiety in their faces. The accused in the bar, in the barricade, says, if you allow me to speak to these people, I will calm them down. And the judge reluctantly agrees. Gandhi comes out of the court, looks at all these peasants screaming, and he says, you must let this judge do his work. If he arrests me, it will be his duty to do so, and it will be just. So I will take the punishment for the accusation that they are doing, which is the truth. I am an activist, I am accused of sedition and I agree to it and I plead guilty. So please do not raise your voice, all of you calm down and you may go home. The crowd disperses and the judge is aghast and he withdraws all complaints against Gandhi and he is allowed to stay back. This allows Gandhi to start schools for children there, to get the women to talk about hygiene, to talk about self-respect, to talk about cooking, hygienic, nutritious, simple food, and living in self-respect. So a young woman comes running to Gandhi and she says, I don't know how to cook, I don't know how to spin, I don't know sweeping, I don't know any work. How can I help you? What can I do? She asks him. Gandhi says, look, those children playing there, all of them, why don't you go take them to the common tap and give them a bath, nice bath. Just comb their hair, clean, and let's see that happening. And she collects all these children, she takes them to the nearest water hole and she cleans them up. She is amused that the hair, they put total wax and they had combed their hair tight in the hair. So all, she's so wonderstruck to find this kind of hairstyle there. So she says, she comes back and she says, I learned so much today, just working with the kids and giving them a bath. This is what learning was all about for Gandhi. And this is how the spinning revolution began in India.
The spinning wheel, Gandhi said, is a national necessity. Not on the clatter of arms, but on the reintroduction of the spinning wheel depends the economic and moral regeneration of India. While touring the country incessantly and tirelessly, Gandhi did not lose sight of India's gravest problem, poverty.
Poverty was something the British wanted to take advantage of in India. One method of controlling India was to improve the British producers' knowledge of Indian clothing tastes in view of making India a mass consumer of British textiles. So they commissioned John Forbes Watson to research on the sartorial tastes of India. J.F. Watson came up with a brilliant single-volume study called The Textiles, Manufacturers and Costumes of the People of India. It was completed in 1866 with precisely such an objective of controlling poverty and taking advantage of the large number of people in India and their different ways of dressing up. John Forbes Watson had earlier produced 18 volumes of 700 samples of Indian textiles that were to be later regarded as textile museums. He thought it necessary that the mills of Lancashire shape their production to target the poor rural classes of India and not the educated urbanized, because the manufacture of lower quality cloth for mass consumption was much more profitable than that of the higher quality cloth. Watson's work really flourished in India, and his rationale dominated British business perspectives. The results were very, very evident. His sharply focused production and distribution plan boosted the consumption of British cotton clothes. The increase from 1849 to 1889 was from just over 2 million pounds to 27 million a year. According to him, India was in a position to become a magnificent customer, says Peter Gonsalves in his book Clothing for Liberation. So Gandhiji proposed an alternative clothing system. He wanted to promote through clothing an economic self-sufficiency that is Swadeshi powerful enough to establish Swaraj. This kind of ideology was already there in our freedom movement when the early Indian nationalists in the first Swadeshi movement of 1903 were inspired by Dadabhai Navroji's drain theory and realized that there was a nexus between economic semiotics of cloth and dominant ideology of creating one's own clothing. Many nationalists continued to wear British textiles and English costume, and that is when Gandhi looked at asking for a ban on British clothing to promote Swadeshi clothing. Through spinning one's own yarn, he said one was promoting Swaraj and Swadeshi. So Gandhiji looks for spinning wheels to make the yarn. People had not seen spinning wheels, but those people who were spinning were supplying to the mills. So they were not going to give it to the spinners, the handloom weavers. So Gandhi said, why not? Why don't we bring spinning wheel and we do it ourselves? So he requests Gangubai Majumdar, a feisty woman volunteer, to go and find him a spinning wheel. She travels around and she goes to Vijapur in Baroda and finds hundreds of spinning wheels that were lying in disuse, and she brings them all in a cart, in a bullock cart. She puts them all and she brings them to the ashram, and Maganlal Gandhi improves on them. He gets the carpenters to come and sit and work on improving the spinning wheel, and they start spinning in the ashram and carding and slivering. The women of Gujarat told Mahatma Gandhi and Gangubai Majumdar that they were willing to spin, but they were not getting slivers of cotton. And Gandhiji requested a friend of his who was making these poonies, as they are called, to supply poonies. In fact, cartloads of poonies came to the ashram, much more than they could cope with. So Gandhi said, why not? Why can't we make this a cottage industry? We must make everybody spin their own yarn and their own cloth. And thus it became a national freedom uniform. To wear the khadar is to make it homogeneous. The rich, the poor, everyone began to wear the same white cloth, which was rough, easily torn, but it was the symbol of self-respect. It was the symbol of rebelling against the British. So everyone in India began to wear the khadi and began to spin. I have heard stories from my mother that during the freedom struggle, her friends, whether they were 6 years old or 8 years old, would spin at home, and at the end of the month they would take the yarn that they had spun to the khadi bandar and get something in return, either pepper or dal or even piece of cloth. Just imagine the power that a young girl of 6 or a woman of 60 just spinning at home had in bringing things to the house. It was like almost, they were adding to the breadwinner's bounty. And this is what Gandhi was talking about: make India self-sufficient. And by spinning, every yarn you spin will make you a little higher, taller in self-respect. This is what Gandhi said. And the spinning wheels that were brought, the big one, the charkha, was difficult to carry around. So Gandhi requested for a design competition to make the charkha small and portable. And this wins the competition. So it's a book charkha, and he suggests improvements for it. And this is how the charkha looks. The sliver of cotton, the spindle, that is the most important, and the joining. The spindle is joined to the... So he began to talk to teachers, asking them to teach mathematics through the spinning wheel, teach economics, teach history, teach soil, teach geography, and teach singing and choreograph while spinning.
Gandhi landed on British soil with thoughts of the hard task ahead. I am here to vindicate the honor of India and to uphold truth as I see it, for I believe it is the keystone of life.
London, Gandhiji expressed a desire to visit Lancashire to meet the factory workers who had been put out of their jobs due to the Great Depression and also because of the fall in business in India due to Gandhiji's Khadi movement. He went to Lancashire for 2 days with Andrews. He told the workers there that he sympathized with them but asked them to think of Indian hardships as well. Though he had been warned that he might meet hostile reception there, people were absolutely surprised at the tumultuous welcome he received from the workers.
तनोरे दाता देखिए ले जो बापू जी नु नाम देखियो दीन तनोरे दाता देखिए ले जो बापू जी नु नाम चरखो पूजाओ रे भंडार चरखे ले जो गांधी जी नु नाम चरखो पूजाओ रे भंडार चरखे ले जो गांधी जी नु नाम बापू जी काते माता जी काते काते भारत नाभी बापू जी काते माता जी काते काते भारत नाभी भूरे कटू त्यारे गामना छोकरा आस पास देखो थाए रेती हो पूरे कटू त्यारे गामना छोकरा आस पास देखो थाए रेती हो बापू जी काते माता जी काते काते भारत नाभी बापू जी काते माता जी काते काते भारत नाभी पूरे कटू त्यारे गामना छोकरा आस पास देखो थाए रेती हो पूरे कटू त्यारे गामना छोकरा आस पास देखो थाए रेती हो
Also could be seen, felt, touched, displayed, worn. So through the threads, everyone who wore it felt they were connected to Mahatma Gandhi in some way. This thread tied them to Mahatma Gandhi. There was that connection that was built to every Indian, everyone who wore that khadi. It kind of brought about homogeneity that was no difference between the lowly or the very well-off person. Rajendra Prasad, coming from a very wealthy feudal family, was wearing khadi. J.B. Kripalani, coming from an educated family, he wore khadi. Sardar Patel gave up all his suit and things like that, and he gave up his lucrative law career to wearing khadi and coming there. Anasuya Ben, the sister of Ambalal Sarabhai, she wore khadi and she became a volunteer. So khadi was something that could be measured, that could be felt, that could be plied, and that could be worn. This was what spun Indians into a frenzy of freedom fervor. song we just heard, Mayer Devo Mota Kapoor, was written by Rajnikant Sen, a very, very popular poet and Bengali writer, because in 1905, in August, there was a lot of protest against the partition of Bengal, and it was at that time that the boycott of British clothes and goods were decided by eminent Bengali leaders and to purchase only Swadeshi. So Indian common men began to wear clothes manufactured in India. This song became very, very popular at that time and was being sung all over in the street corners. The song describes that even though the cloth of the mother may be coarse, it is ours. We may be poor, but let us wear this with pride. But we are talking about then, at that time, what happened then. What about now? Are there young people today who listen to all these stories from our freedom struggle and the way the spinning wheel played a major role in it? Do they think about it? There is this young man called Karupaya in a school in Chettinad, Tamil Nadu, Kottamangalam, who decided to create a spinning wheel using the engine of a broken toy car, attached a rusted wire from the fence as the spindle, took cotton grown on trees and spun on it. So here is a spinning wheel. So can we today look around and see what is available in nature and create things out of it? Nature is being overwhelmed by the things we have produced artificially, the plastics, etc. And some schools in Tamil Nadu, particularly the Golden Gate School and Emerald Valley School in Salem, have encouraged their students to clean up the lakes in their area and also use discarded plastic to create strips for weaving bags, doormats, or partitions. Gandhiji's idea for education was producing useful things while studying. So, through his spinning program, Gandhi brought in his basic education ideas, which he called Nai Talim. He wanted education for hygiene and self-sufficiency and dignity before thinking about any kind of political freedom. So his basic education policy was, he said, the best thing he has given to India. This policy was based on the view that a child's education must begin with the teaching of a useful craft to enable the child to cope with life right from the beginning of study and training. Gandhi wanted everything to be taught scientifically so that the child will come to know of the why and wherefore of every process, however young the child may be. If a child is explained to, giving due respects to its learning, the child will surely become curious, he said. So his emphasis on craft-centered education had great importance in Indian scenario. In a poor country, craft would make education self-supportive. So right from class 1, whatever they spin or produce can be added into their account. Gandhi links education with socio-economic development of the community. If education does not cater to the needs of the society, then such education should be wasteful, he said. Gandhiji's emphasis on craft and vocational education is not only because of its productive utility, but because of an ideology that he held very dear, the dignity of labor. He thought that vocation-oriented education can provoke idealism among students. Education would incorporate an attitude into the minds of the student who look upon manual work and intellectual work on equal terms. Gandhi wears khadi to Buckingham Palace. So when he is given an invitation to meet the king, when he is visiting London, the invitation said morning dress, and Gandhi says, I'm wearing my morning dress, so just add a U there. And he says, I'm wearing this and I'm walking in, wearing his chappals, his above the knee khadi cloth and a shawl over his shoulders. He walks into Buckingham Palace to meet the king. This is the kind of dignity and self-respect that he wanted Indians to have. Be fearless. Be fearless of getting punished in imprisonment, or not having riches, or not having any kind of position, but it is the work that will come after you and give you a name. This is what he was talking about. And he walked, and he walked almost around the earth, 48 miles a day. He walked. In Wardha, in his ashram, he would give interviews while walking. He would be walking briskly, and the old man people had to keep pace with him as the young journalists walked, running behind him, asking him questions, but he would always give them full answers. One young journalist who joined this group of walkers in Wardha was, trying to keep pace with Gandhi, and Gandhi and the group walks to a certain distance, and there they each one of them pick a stone and put it in their bag, and they come back and they put the stone in a pile, and next day they walk to another distance, and at the end of that distance they all pick up some stone and they come back and put it in a pile. The journalist was quite alarmed, and he asked him, why are you bringing stones like this? So Gandhi said, we have to create a pathway here, and we're collecting stones for that. And so we don't want to bring stones from only one direction. That is why we are going in different directions every day, and we are picking these stones, and as soon as we have a pile enough for creating this path, we are going to make this path. This is what Gandhi told this young man. And Gandhi's walking in the Salt March, the most interesting aspect of the Salt March was that he sent groups of young volunteers to each of the 10 places where he was going to rest after 10 miles of walking. He sent them with a survey, a huge line of questions, and all these questions had to be answered after talking to the villagers, and these questions and answers were handed over to Gandhi as he came in. And the evening talk, the walking was very early in the morning before the sunrise, and they would reach the next place by breakfast time, and then have a bath and eat and chat and have rest, and evening there would be a talk and then some more rest, and before the sun rose to the next place. So every place these young volunteers had to wait for him to reach that place, and as soon as he reached the place they would give him this survey answers that they had received. How many houses in this village? Is there a school for girls in this village? How are the Dalits treated in this village? What is the consumption of rice here? What is the consumption of salt here? What is the main occupation in this village? How many men, how many women, how many houses, what kind of roofing, etc., etc. All these questions were answered in a survey and given to him, and that evening's talk was based on what he read in the afternoon from that survey. So every place he went to was particularly addressed to that audience. And the genius of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who devised the route of from Ahmedabad to Dundee, because Dundee was one sea face that was just throwing salt on the seashore, and you could easily pick salt from there. And they decided that they would not go to the big cities. It would be the very, very small little villages. It would be 24 days. It would be 10 miles a day, 241 miles after 24 days. And the whole world woke up to this man in 1930 because of this walking that he did. Researchers have calculated that Mahatma Gandhi walked around 18 kilometers or 22,500 steps every day for over 40 years and covered a total of 79,000 kilometers for his campaigns between 1913 and 1948. This is equivalent to walking around the earth twice. There is a very interesting story we hear about how in Wardha he would give interviews during his walks. Journalists would find it very difficult to keep pace with him. He always listened carefully and gave full answers while walking. One young journalist noticed that Gandhi and his group picked up a stone at the end of the walk as they returned and added it to the pile. When asked about it, he was told it was Gandhi's idea to pick stones for a pathway that needed to be created and to pick stones from different areas each day, and once enough stones had been collected, they could create the pathway.
The villagers gave a ceremonial reception to the Satyagrahis on the outskirts of the village.
Interesting about the Salt March is also that Gandhiji had sent volunteers to each of those 10 places that they were going to rest for the 10 nights in the 241-mile long walk for 24 days. The volunteers were to conduct a survey and gather information on that place. The main source of income, the education level, salt consumption, male-female ratio, Dalit treatment, number of houses, per capita income, etc., etc. The volunteers were supposed to hand the results over to Gandhiji as he walked in. The evening's talk was based on the information he received. This march influenced Martin Luther King to conduct his march to demand an end to apartheid and asking for equal opportunities for blacks in 1963, a testament to the revolutionary power of nonviolence. Gandhi's approach directly impacted Martin Luther King, who argued that the Gandhian philosophy was the only morally, practically sound method open to oppressed people in their struggle for freedom. The Salt March spread Gandhi's name around the world, and in the southern Brazilian town of Bahia, dock workers got together and created a festival called Filhos de Gandhi, meaning Children of Gandhi, to celebrate his memory. So there is an annual carnival called Filhos de Gandhi in Bahia province of Brazil.
बोलिए भजनिया गाते छे सुर सुर सुतरिया पीवे छे पट पट पीनरिया कोई खाली बने छे जो वांकरिया पीवे छे पट पट पीनरिया कोई खाली बने छे जो वांकरिया हमें गांधी बापू ना निशालिया हमें गांधी बापू ना निशालिया हमें गांधी बापू ना निशालिया.
Reading was a great passion for Gandhi. In Eravda jail, after the great trial, Gandhi read Gibbon's volumes on the decline and fall of Rome, Kipling's Songs of Empire, the Mahabharata, Pluto, Jules Verne, Macaulay, Shaw, Walter Scott, Faust, Tagore, Wells, Woodrow, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, histories of Scotland, of Sikhs, of India, of birds, of cities, biographies of Pitt, Columbus, Wilberforce, Paul of Tarsus, Kabir, writings of Vivekananda, Dayananda Saraswati, Aurobindo, Tilak, Kalekar, Mashruwala, and several religious texts. He also spun 500 yards every day and wrote a primer for children and compiled bhajans. He also prepared a short concordance of Bhagavad Gita with an index. There were no lamps in his cell, so all the reading and writing had to be done by daylight. He made notes on all the books he read and commented on them. He also wrote at least 50 letters a day and answered every letter he received. Gandhiji was in Eravda jail, Pune, serving his 6 years sentence in the sedition case from 1922. Remember the great trial? In the trial where Gandhiji had said, I plead guilty to all the charges, and he asked for maximum punishment? Mr. C.N. Bloomfield, ICS, District and Sessions Judge, had given him 6 years imprisonment, but he had also said, 6 years in all, which I feel is my duty to place upon you. I'd like to say in doing so that if in the course of events should make it possible for the government to reduce the period and release you, no one will be better pleased than I. The judge said this. Just 2 years later, remember in those 2 years the number of books he read, the commentary he had made, the length of yarn he had spun, etc., etc. On 12th of January 1924, Gandhiji was suddenly rushed to the Sassoon Medical College Hospital in Pune. He was required to undergo an emergency appendectomy to remove an inflamed appendix. The surgery began on the night and a thunderstorm was raging on. The surgeon who operated on Gandhiji was Colonel Maddock. As the records say, Gandhiji thanked his surgeon profusely and they became warm friends later. While the surgery was on, the electric bulb suddenly went off and the surgery had to be conducted in the light of a hurricane lamp. On February 5th, 1924, the British government remitted Gandhiji's sentence and released him unconditionally. While he was recuperating in the Sassoon hospital, one day suddenly Dilip Kumar Roy, the famous musician, came to visit him and said he would like to sing for Gandhiji. Mahatma Gandhi and people around were very much elevated by the music that Dilip Kumar Roy sang. There was an interesting exchange between Gandhiji and Dilip Kumar Roy on music and art. Dilip Kumar Roy and M.S. Subbulakshmi were among the most favorite musicians of Gandhiji. Let's listen to the two of them sing Vande Mataram.
Vande Mataram, Vande Mataram, Ujalam Sukhalam Malayaj Sheetalam, Jajamalam Mataram, Vande Mataram, Vande Mataram, Shubhra Jyotsnam Pulakitayaminim, Kulasumita Dhuvarala Shobhini, Suhasini Sumadhura Bhashini, Sukhadan Varadan Mataram, Vande Mataram, Vande कंठ कल कल निनाद कराले विद्रीन चकोटि भुजैर् कर करवाले केवल मातुरी अवले बहुबल धारिणी नमामि तारिणी त्रिपुर वारिणी मातरम वंदे मातरम वंदे मातरम ही प्राणा शरीरे ही प्राणा शरीरे बाबू से तुम्ही मां सकती निराय तुम्ही मां भक्ती बाबू से तुम्ही मां सकती निराय तुम्ही मां भक्ती तुम्हारी प्रतिमा घडी मंदिरे मंदिरे ही दुर्गा दशौ प्राणधारिणी कमला कमलदल विहारिणी वाणी विद्याधारिणी नमामि नमामि कमला ममला मधुला उज्ज्वलां सुफला मातरं नमामि कमला ममला मधुला उज्ज्वलां सुफला श्यामला सरला सुमिता भूषिता धरणी धरणी मातरम वंदे मातरम वंदे मातरम वंदे मातरम.
He gave to clothing to communicate historical, social, political, cultural, spiritual and moral significance to clothing was a part of his communication methodology. So also was silence. Once every while he would say, I am going to be silent for the next 24 hours. No communication was stopped. Everything was written down and given to people. He would not utter a single word for 24 hours or more, whatever he had decided about. So silence was one way he communicated. But collected works of Mahatma Gandhi run to 50,000 pages, 500 pages of 10 volumes, still not complete. So he also wrote, he also spoke, and he also spun, and he also walked, and these were his ways of communication. His non-verbal communication were silence and his clothing and his spinning, and his writing and speaking were his verbal communications, and music. So his Angika, his Vachika and the Aharya, that is the costuming that he wore, all worked towards the sattva of Mahatma Gandhi that we get today, that is, be true. Be true, he says. He does not say speak the truth. He says be true. That is the only thing that will sustain us. Long live the Mahatma.
Sahana bhavatu sahanau bhunattu saha viryam karvavahai tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं कर्वावहै तेजस्विनावधितमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
da